a little worried.
That's that Long Beach.
I'm a little
style
worried.
Right there.
I'm a little worried.
What you worried about?
I prayed. I said, Lord, just protect my testimony. I heard what you did last time. Will was telling me.
I told him about
like,
the ChatGPT when you asked 10 questions. To ask
yeah. I thought about doing that again, and then I was like, no, I'm not gonna do that to Sammy and Sean. We're gonna,
Hey, we're ready for it though.
Yeah.
This podcast keeps me on
Sammy's
my
ready for
toes,
it.
dog. I gotta stay sharp.
You're always getting everyone in trouble though. That's what I'm hearing.
No, absolutely not.
He don't. Will plays the nice guy on here. That's his role.
I try to be myself.
He's the sage.
He is the sage. He is.
I'm the provocative.
Come from the house?
one.
Come from a meeting or?
No, yeah, we just did our meeting right now for we got our volunteer night tomorrow.
Okay.
Little celebration joint, so we had to go over that.
Okay.
That service order, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, right.
All right. Yeah. What's up? What's up, everybody? Welcome to Beyond Later. We're recording. We are. Nancy's like, hey, we're recording. Thanks for joining us. We got some great people in the room today. We got Sean Fenner in the house.
Yep.
Pastors in Long Beach. LBC people. Shout out. Do you
go.
live in Long Beach?
I do. Born and raised, bro.
What?
4 generations on my mom's side in Long Beach.
Let's
What?
go.
He's the
Yep.
mayor of Long Beach.
Come
bro.
on, man.
Let's go.
How does that even work?
I eat, sleep, and breathe Long Beach, Well, how it works is my family moved from Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. There was actually a newspaper
You
article
guys
about
kept your
it.
twang too as well? Because you still have it, bro.
Man, bro, I still got it. I got a little Brooklyn in me, you know what I mean? No, but my grandmother actually, her Girl Scout troop tried to raise money to keep the Dodgers in Brooklyn.
Really?
And there was a newspaper article about it. Isn't it cute? These little girls rate $300. They think it's going to keep the Dodgers in Brooklyn. Didn't work, so we moved with them, bro.
No.
We moved with them.
That's loyal. That's loyalty.
We loyal,
right there.
bro.
That's
we loyal.
So you're a generational Dodger fan.
That's right.
Okay, I'll introduce a few. We got hold on. We got Sammy Rodriguez in the house. We got Will Chung in the house, and then we got a bunch. We got who's Jensen with? Whose friend is he with? You?
He's with me, yeah.
Okay. What's up, Jensen? Thanks for hanging in with us today. And then we got Chelsea in the house. We got Alize, whose back's turned to us. I think that's Alize. Alex in the house. Nancy in the house. And then Andy. Okay, I had to do those quick introductions because I got to know, as a generational Dodger fan, okay? All right, welcome to the podcast, everybody.
Here we go.
As a generational Dodger fan, what did you feel about the trans nuns who the Dodgers were having to do the opening throwing ceremony, who kind of make fun of Catholicism and they're part of the LGBT community, but I mean outside of it, anyone could be part of it, but there was a lot of ruckus around that, which then ultimately, I don't know, who's the famous guy in the Dodgers, the white guy?
Kershaw.
He's Christian, right?
Yeah.
So then, because I guess he's been asking for years to bring back Christian Day or whatever, which gave him the opportunity to play that card.
Yeah.
And the Dodgers were kind of trying to save marketing face. So they agreed to do Christian Day because they were trying to kind of subside all the Catholics and Christians. As a lineage Dodger fan, where your grandmother and her parents moved from Brooklyn to follow this team.
Yeah, what would she say? That's what I want to know. What would she say? I want my $300 back.
What is going on?
I mean, if I'm going to be honest with you guys, the initial thought that came in my head was God, could it have been any other team?
Why not the Angels?
Why not the Angels?
Yeah, right,
That's
right.
exactly what I was. Or the Giants, please, Lord, let it be the Giants. No, I think it was for me, on a serious note, it was an opportunity to really show this reality of what Christians face in the public eye, because I've watched Kershaw not just push for that because that happened, but I've watched him push for that for years. I mean, he actually got us in partnership with the Magic Johnson Foundation one time. We brought urban kids that had never been to a Dodgers game, 500 kids. They got us free tickets to come. I remember Kershaw and the believers on the team staying 3-4 hours after the game, signing baseballs, signing towels. They were just sitting with kids talking about Jesus.
Cool.
That he's not just about that because the opposition.
Right.
He's about that
really
because he
about it.
believes in the gospel.
Wow.
And he wants young kids to know that Jesus is more important than baseball. And so I mean, I saw it as really an opportunity, for the Lord to take what the enemy meant for evil and to turn it for good. That's what I saw. I saw an opportunity for Christians to step up and say, hey, if they can do this, why are we not allowed to do this? Because we're passionate about seeing people know that Jesus is important, and we want to be able to talk about it. And Kershaw, I mean, for me, he's been one of those guys that, like, you just can't deny that he's about it. He's been about his faith. He's been consistent throughout his career. And so it was a cool opportunity for me, man. Like, just in partnership with FCA, seeing all that they do, different believers that have been on the team, Pujols, other believers.
Yeah.
I just thought it was a great opportunity. But, yeah, it could have been the Giants. That's for sure. It could have been the Giants.
See, I'm from the base. I'm a Giants fan. So, it wasn't us. We're more holy in the Giants organization. Yeah.
So, like, what do you think? Like, what would it take for you to, because I know a lot of people that were just like that's it. I'm done with the Dodgers.
Yeah.
This is a line for me. And then when they did the Christian thing, which number one, I think is a great perspective you have on how God has used it for good. But like on the flip side, other people were saying like, man, they're just trying to. It's now it's about money. They're just. They're doing the Christian Day because they're just trying to. They didn't realize that I don't know how many Catholics walked on the stadium. They did like a protest.
Yep.
Specifically the Catholic Church, because these were like trans nuns.
Yeah.
So Christians were for like backing it, but the Catholics were like very angry. So they're like doing protest at the stadium and stuff like that. And so. I know a lot of people who were just like that was just a money move for them. That was almost like what Target did. Like when Target did the front end pride displays right when you walk in, and then everyone started making a fuss and they lost all that money. They were like, "We'll keep it, but we'll move it to the back of the store." Like so they're like trying to now just play the money game. And then corporations reveal like where their heart is, which really it's either they're trying to create a woke persona, or they're trying to save money, right? Or like just try to make out the dollar. So like for you, would there like if they didn't do the Christian Day, would that like was there any point in your head that like maybe we're not going to be Dodgers fans anymore?
Yeah, like maybe we'll burn all our jerseys and become Angels fans. No, that never went in my head.
Give up on baseball.
That's spoken like a true Dodger fan, though.
No, I think Adam, like one of the things that I'm encouraged by is believers that do not give up on being in the world but not of it.
Yeah.
And I think for me, like one of the biggest things that I process through that is like it's coming for every team. It's not a Dodgers thing. It's a world thing.
Okay.
Like this is of the world. This is the enemy in opposition to truth. It's not a Dodgers thing. So I could go be an Angels fan. I could go be I'll never be a Giants fan, but I could go be a whatever fan. You know what I mean?
We'll welcome you in. It's okay.
I mean, but the reality is like this is coming
be a
for
Little League fan.
This is coming for everyone. And now's the time to take a stand and show people like, look, we're not just going to accept these things and not speak up for what is truth. And I think this was an opportunity for believers, whether Catholic, Christian, whatever, believers in Jesus to say, hey, we are not for this. And you assume that we're just gonna take this and that we're good with it, but we're not. And I don't know that the best way to deal with that is like to pile up all your Dodger stuff and burn it in your backyard and make a TikTok about it.
Yeah.
But rather to say like, no, I want to stand to see this organization take a stand and change because this is coming for the whole league. I mean, and not just baseball, it's coming for everything. So I think that's the bigger conversation.
Yeah.
And I love LA. Like I'm a Dodgers fan because I love LA, not just my family history. But like I eat, sleep, and breathe, Long Beach, Greater LA, because I want to see God move in my city, and I want to see revival and renewal and restoration. And I'm not at the point where I believe that it's so far gone that God can't change things. Like I really believe, like if God could change Corinth, God could change Long Beach. Like, come on, bro. You know what I mean? And so that's what I'm looking at is like, no, now's our time to take a stand, not to run away or to flee or to go to another team, because then you're just hiding from what's coming for everyone. That's my perspective on it.
Yeah, I agree too. I think for me, first of all, I'm not a Dodgers fan. I'm not even a baseball fan.
Yeah, way to stay neutral. Way to stay neutral, bro.
I didn't even know. This is my first time even hearing about this.
Oh, you didn't know about this?
No idea.
Oh, well, then I got to show you a
I
TikTok
haven't
of
even
it.
watched a full baseball game my whole life, probably. Not even once.
Who do
You
I
gotta
send this
do it,
to?
bro. You gotta
Nancy,
do it.
Andy?
So this is all new
you-
information for me.
Bro,
But
it was bad.
It was
bad.
was this recent? Like,
It was this
In
season.
the summer.
This season.
oh yeah, I didn't.
During
even-
I think it was June, Gay Pride Month.
Yeah.
I'm gonna. You seriously didn't know about this?
No.
Oh
I
my
don't,
gosh.
I don't really keep up with sports outside of UFC.
You're a UFC fan?
UFC fan and a little bit of basketball.
Wow.
Laker fan, right?
Come
Come on.
The funny thing is, I grew
You
up-
better not
no,
be
you-
a Clipper fan. I'm walking
No,
out.
you got
Walking
to.
off.
I'm walking
Your
up.
big old Lakers jersey. on.
When it comes to
Sure,
sports
better.
in the States, I grew up in Korea. I was born and raised in Korea until I was
Yeah.
15. So I
Yeah.
never repped a city or a state moving to the States.
Yeah.
So I followed players. Growing up in a different country, I looked up to players. And my guy was Darren Williams. Because I moved to Illinois and he went to U of I. So I
Yeah.
was a huge Utah fan while he played there.
Yeah.
Because I used to follow players. So I'm not.
Yeah.
And then my roommates were Warrior fans because they were all from the Bay. So I'm just
Yeah.
just being a third weird sports fan in the sense that there's no city that I feel like
Yeah.
but I feel like I should be a Lakers fan because I've been in California for
Time
so
to
time,
years.
go,
bro.
bro. It's time
We'll
to go.
anoint you as
Are
a
you
Laker
Lakers
fan.
or Clippers?
Lakers.
Okay.
Yeah, hey.
Hey, man, I've been a Lakers fan since Robert Sacker was playing center, baby. Come
Let's
on now.
go.
Good years and bad years.
Let's go.
But I think that to me is like one of the great issues that I think every Christian is trying to wrestle
Yeah.
to. Like at what point, whatever everyone will put this in whatever framework they know of, whatever church they're a part of. So you could call it lukewarmness, you could call it being accepting the world,
Sure.
whatever it is, right? And so I think everybody, some have more of an extreme outlook, some have less of an extreme, and just a total, whatever, don't bother me or whatever. So I think that's where most, and we've talked about it on the podcast before, but that is a very real reality where you're talking about, which nothing's too far off that it can't be redeemed, which I 100% agree with. But as you're exposing your children and to certain things, because here's the thing, I have friends and family that are LGBTQ community and I love them and we have very great relationships and
Yeah.
I have LGBTQ people in my life that call me, ask for prayer and stuff like that. And so in regards to actual lifestyle, all that stuff like that, though I believe the Word of God has a different plan for somebody's life, I have no desire to excommunicate or expunge anyone in
that's
terms
right.
of how I have a relationship with them or love them. I think overall, what I tend to have concern with is the overall agendizing, someone's sexuality.
Yeah.
And in creating, to me, all these companies create marketing tactics around a person's sexuality. And I have a lot of issues around that. Not just ethically.
Yeah.
To me, that's a little morally and ethically wrong when Nike and other companies just they change all their logo to gay pride flags except for in the Middle East, on their Twitter, on their Instagram bio, all that. So immediately right away this isn't a conviction. This is dollar bills, that you're trying to attract or do or whatever. And for some it's because LGBTQ leaders are in leadership and they're trying
Right.
to just expose what they know, and so there's an added element of that. But I say that to say that is the tough part, because you take Disney, you take Disneyland. I was there a month and a half ago with my wife, and we saw one of the parades came through, and we were walking by, and they had a Frozen float, and the who's the one that does the ice? Any of you guys got daughters? You would know Frozen
Elsa?
better than I. Elsa, is she the one that does the ice? I got only
Sing it out,
boys.
sing it out.
I only got boys, so I don't.
You don't know about
I don't
baseball,
know the
but you know
character.
Elsa.
Yeah.
Okay,
You
bro.
got two
Okay.
girls, bro.
Yeah, you got
Two
two
girls.
girls. So I'm like,
Daughters.
one of you
I
guys,
respect
one of y'all
it.
who have daughters would
Yeah.
know this.
Yeah.
So Elsa comes by in the float, and you guys know her little dress. She's, the blue dress and the white hair, and it was a trans man, or I don't, if I'm wording it wrong, but it was a trans person.
Really?
Yes, who was Elsa on the float. And my wife just looked at me, and I was like, "Oh man!" And again, like I don't have issue with anyone who's trans, or I do believe that God has a different purpose in their life. But as a whole, someone walking by me, I take no issue with that. It doesn't offend me. But now on a float at Disney, representing a character that I would know in the movie is female. And then my son, still at a young age, but my son's being able to see that, and it was easily perceivable, that the person wasn't biologically female. That it just, me and my wife were like, because me and her always talk about like and I've talked about it with our church before, like as of right now, I don't feel the conviction that I feel like I need to walk away from all Disney, because I have friends that are that. They just gave up on all Disney movies and all that. Like they've completely boycotted the entire anything. If it's got the logo on it, it's banned, right? And I just said, well, my personal conviction is like the movies, like Lightyear and others and Strange World and all that encourage it and are trying to expose it. That stuff we don't partake in. And then other than that, like we still engage with things that are Disney. Then that parade came by, and then it was like, and then they have the girls dress thing, the Bibbidi Bop Boutique. They have like a trans person who's it's a biological male who's in a dress, and he's like, dressing the girls in the dresses. It's like where the girls could come and be a princess. So they started doing that. I think that one was at Disney World. And so the question I think every Christian is always debating with, like, at what point do you start to disengage with something that you say, hey, this may not be something that's good for us and our family. And I'm just, because I was curious to hear your side on the Dodgers, because I don't watch sports.
It's good.
I don't watch sports at all.
You don't?
No, nothing. I don't watch anything. I don't watch it. So I don't care, but it just does it. I have ADHD, like high functioning ADHD. I can't. Sports, 10 minutes in, I'm done. Like once I saw the game and I saw the ball go from one side of the field to the other, I understood the game. It's like, let's move on. Even though like I highly respect athletes, because it's an incredible amount of skill and talent. So there's that element. So when I see everything that happens in baseball or football or whatever, I just kind of roll my eyes. But I'm like, man, glad I'm not a fan of those things, because where I'd have to make an actual contemplation and a decision. And then when it happens, because I love film and movies and pop culture, is like, then it happens at Disney, and I'm like, oh, shoot. Now the ball's in my court, and now I got... But what also a lot of people don't know, too, is there's only two things that Disneyland still does to this day that Walt Disney created and founded. Everything else at Disney is like... It's been changed over the years. Some executive has come, and so all the rides in some way, shape, or form have pretty much changed to when Walt made them or whatever. So there's only two things in all of Disney brand, resort, all that still happen that Walt created. Number one is Jungle Cruise. So like Jungle Cruise is still pretty much the same as it was, with minor technology upgrades, but it's still the same as like Walt intended, kind of the script, the feel. The second thing is, every first weekend of December in Disneyland, Disney brings in a celebrity, and the celebrity reads the story of Jesus' birth in Main Street. They shut Main Street down. People get chairs.
No idea.
They sit down, and literally, like, I was invited one year. It's really hard to get into. Someone invited me one time, a friend, and Chris Hemsworth was reading the Christmas story. Cool. This year, Brie Larson.
That's right.
Read the Christmas story, right?
New information for me.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
They've been doing it since Walt Disney said Disney will always read the Christmas story, the birth of Jesus, till the day I die. And that's the one thing Disney executives still to this day have maintained and still done.
Yeah.
So you look at that and you're like, okay, you got floats, these ones going, and then you guys are telling Jesus' birth on the 1st December, like. What
I think is interesting, though, like whether it's baseball, Disney, we're drinking Starbucks right now, any company,
come on,
their purpose is going to be the dollar bills, right? So their purpose is not they want to be successful. So their definition of success is growth, money, finances. And I think where we get in trouble as Christians is when we expect companies that aren't Christian to have the same values as us. So there's two ways to go about it. We could either boycott it, but then our purpose, like you said, is to be in the world but not of the world. So the answer is easy. The process is messy, especially when we're dealing with the LGBTQ plus community. that's a messy one because it's like it's easy to say it, but it's easy for what the devil wants to do, what communities want to do is create a blanket statement and just cancel. It's the whole thing we talked last time, cancel culture. So like my wife, I think I told you, my wife was Tinkerbell at Disney World. For like
Yep.
I don't know 5-6 years. They actually got to say that they're friends with the character. So I always thought that my wife was a little crazy. And when I first met her, I said, "Oh my god, you're friends with who? You got some problems, girl."
They're not allowed to say I am Tinkerbell. They can only say I'm friends with Tinkerbell.
Exactly. So that was a little weird. So I prayed for her. She got delivered. No, I'm just kidding. But I think that with Disney, so we got a daughter, almost a year and a half. We took her to Disney for her first birthday. It was fun. It was wild. But talking about that stuff, for me, my conviction is, man, I want to be in the chaos. Like I want to be in the tension, and how can I stand like a Daniel, right? Yeah. So Daniel said to Nebuchadnezzar, he said, "I'm gonna interpret your dream. I hope it's not for you." Nebuchadnezzar was like one of the worst dictators, evil. Yep. But he loved him to a place where he's saying, "I want my love and my convictions, my passions to change you. I don't want to boycott you." Because the thing is, yes, you could boycott something, but then how are we able to change something if we pull away from it? But where I think it's the most powerful right now, where we have an advantage, is the family.
That's good.
Where we're able to be in the midst of it, and like you did probably with your sons, right? You're able to say, "Hey, let's talk about that. You saw that?" Because that problem isn't going away, right? Any fall of major empires, there was obsession over gender. There's obsession over one other area. I think you have mentioned it before. Yeah. And so I think this is an opportunity to talk as a family, because this is only going to increase. And they need to know, as Christians, hey, we could disagree, but we could still love. Yeah. But we could have a disagreement with it, but it doesn't mean I want to pull away from it. Because here's what happens. This may be a true story, maybe not. But this was I'm pretty
it's
sure.
A story.
It's a pastor story.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. But I don't want to fact check me, people. This was like years ago, where it was in Hollywood, and one of the top industry leaders in Hollywood, this was like in, I don't know, the 30s, 40s, like early on, and reached out to these top theological universities, said, "Would you send us your best and brightest to come to Hollywood so we could have a change in Hollywood, so we could have people that are Christian in Hollywood in places of power?" And this president said, "I would rather send them to hell than Hollywood."
What?
Right?
Whoa.
Yeah.
And so what happened was, as Christians, we abdicated our role to be in the middle of the chaos. And then what happened? When we abdicate, you better believe other agendas are going to come full circle.
Yeah.
And so for me, where I stand is one, man, I want to be in the midst of these moments so that I don't always, like, if I have to write off every person that disagrees with me, man, I'm going to have to write off I got to write off my wife, because we're never going to agree on everything at once. It doesn't mean we can't stand on convictions. It doesn't mean that we can't be afraid to be canceled. But I think what it means is we could say, hey, this is something we disagree as a family. Yeah. And the number one area that, especially states like California, other places are trying to take away, is our voices as parents to parent our kids, and even as pastors to parent and to shepherd our community. So for me, it's like in those moments, we're able to have that conversation, because I feel like boycotting has a certain power, but the thing that's even more powerful is a conversation that really creates a relationship that creates change.
Yeah, I agree principally with that too. Like, I think it's Jeremiah 34, when the Israelites are in captivity from the Babylonians. God tells Jeremiah to tell the people, seek the welfare of the city. He says, seek the prosperity of the nation that's oppressed you. He doesn't say rebel against them, boycott them, turn the nation over. He says, while you're there, first of all, because you're being judged, 70 years of captivity because of your disobedience. But while you're there, seek the prosperity of your neighbor, because you have to be a witness of my goodness where you are. So even for me, I mean, I have so many church people who will come up to me and say, hey, pastor, I'm a teacher, and I don't know what to do about this curriculum that I'm supposed to teach. And we have to talk through that. I have friends who are entertainment, and they're like, hey, in this industry, most of the people here, when it comes to my theology and belief about gender, is the complete opposite. Am I supposed to leave? And I always disciple them, stay. Live out the gospel. Show them the love of Christ. Have tough conversations where you can speak up and say, hey, I disagree with this. It doesn't mean I don't love you, but you respect me, I respect you, and let's work through our differences and seek the prosperity and the blessing of where we are, instead of trying to. So I fully agree with that, and that's where my mind mostly goes. And when it comes to kids, we got to have those conversations.
Yeah.
Like my wife and I went to public school. I went to military, U.S. Army, because my dad works for U.S. Army. My wife went to public school, but now that my kid went to kindergarten, we're going back and forth. Back and forth, right?
Is your kid in public kindergarten?
She's in a private Christian school.
Okay.
So we went that route.
Yeah.
Right? But that was me.
Is she still learning crazy stuff from other kids from it?
No, not right.
No?
She's only in kindergarten. So
I mean, my son's in kindergarten. He learned the middle finger.
yeah,
in private kindergarten.
She learned that from me before the kids. So I'm
just like, dang, like even in private school, you learn in the
Extend
middle
your hand to
finger.
the screen right now.
Yeah.
But even that conversation was interesting because even philosophically, my theology is she should be in the world.
Right.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, bro.
Right? But then as a parent, I was like, hey, she's still young.
Yeah.
In these early formative years, I do want to give her a foundation. And when the time is right, we may pull her out in junior high and high school when her faith is more solid and strong. But those are tough conversations I'd be having with my wife, with friends, with pastors.
Well, I think conversation always brings about conviction. And that's really what you want with your kids is you don't want them to live off of your faith. You want them to be convicted and stir their own faith in Christ. And I think what you have to be aware of too is like as a family, you have strengths and weaknesses.
Yep.
And so I think to judge other families and say like, well, everybody should homeschool their kids or everybody should send their kids to a private school. You have strengths and weaknesses as a family. We're different. We homeschool our kids. But my wife is a teacher by nature. Like if she wasn't that, we wouldn't homeschool our kids. We'd be in a Christian university for the first 5 years because I believe that that's super important for their formation, right? But then also I think what I draw back to is like what Adam started with. I think you're right, Adam. There is a balance and a prayerfulness of safety. And you talked a little bit about that, Will. Like, I think you can engage because, like, they're going to see trans people. If not on a float, at a gas station, at a grocery store. And you've got to build conviction about that. You've got to have those conversations with them. But should that trans person be dressing your daughter? Probably not. And that's where you have to balance, like, what is safe for my child and my responsibility as a parent. And I think parents should pray more often about what is safe and what is not. And that should stir conviction in their own family. And what I find is like, man, when I talk to kids as a pastor, I talk to a lot of kids that have been abused, taken advantage of. They most often, Adam, come to me and say, it was because of a lack of a conversation.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, man, like I just think conversation brings conviction and allows safety in the family. And then you can be honest about what your strengths and weaknesses are and what God is calling you to. Because I think it's also dangerous to blanket statement. And I love like Daniel's story, right? I love Esther's story. And they're all different. And I love that like Jesus had to go through Samaria. But then to say every Christian has to respond that way, I think is doing a disservice to the Spirit of God that stirs and leads people.
And different people have different convictions. Like I have a friend, he was executive producer for one of the largest K-pop entertainment groups. And at a certain point, so he was
BTS?
A different group, just to say, it's the competing
only
group.
I know.
But anyways, my point is, he gets radically saved while he was an executive producer for a very dark industry. And when he first got saved, he could no longer make music for them. He just couldn't do it. He was on fire. You know those people when they first get saved, they need a complete separation. And for about a decade, he left the industry. And he was praying to God and saying, God, if you would anoint me and gift me, I want to start my own. But now his faith is strong. Now he's not tempted. And now he has a different philosophy, not a different, a growing maturity and understanding how to be a witness. So he's back in. But now he's back in with certain demands. He's saying certain lyrics won't be on my beats.
Come on, man.
Certain dancing and certain ways these individuals dress, they're not going to be on my songs. Right? So now he's coming in as a witness. He has the skill. He has the craft. He has the clout and the power because he's actually good at what he does, the way that Daniel was, or the way believers should have something to offer of value. But he also has convictions. So now he could dance. Where he says, in the past, y'all might, I ain't playing that game. You still want my beats? Here are my demands. So now he's being a witness. There's a little bit of confrontation, but he's also in the world where he's showing them this is, I want my songs to have this type of music, right? So I'm just like, I'm so proud of him. I'm like, yo, like, be in that space for the last 10 years. You had to get out, But now that you're back in, God's putting you as a pioneer in this space to bring God's kingdom in the way. And he was sending me clips in the studio before everyone's there. He's praying in there.
Wow.
He has worship music in there.
Yeah.
And he's literally just like for 30 minutes worshiping and praising God in one of the darkest spaces in the music industry. So I'm like, that's what you got to do, bro. Right.
Yeah.
So, but a season, his conviction was, I can't be in there.
Yeah.
I can't be there because it's too dark. And that went for about a decade. And now he's like, I'm going back in.
Yeah.
Right. So giving people the grace to be prompted by the Spirit. You know what I mean?
And I think you said it. It's like every family is going to have a certain grace.
Yeah.
And so what is that conviction? What is that grace that you stand by? I think of, like, again, going back to companies, I think of this all the time. A lot of times we expect these companies to act saved before they get saved, right? And in reality, if we act like that, we're just discipling them into religion. But if we could stand there, again, you talked about John 4, Jesus had the conversation with the woman and built relationship, but then had a tough question. Hey, bring me your husband.
Yeah.
So it's not that I think we swing where we say, okay, we just want to love people and we want to leave them in their sin, in their mess, and we're just going to keep loving. That's not the gospel. And neither is just telling them, you better live this way. No, they need an encounter and a conversation. And then what Jesus did was he convicted, he called that woman out into a higher standard. He said, I don't want you to stay in that same place. And so to me, I just feel like as we walk with these companies, communities, as we walk with these groups, these sports teams, I think we want to be a representation. It means that with that Dodgers moment, yeah, you probably shouldn't show up on that game. You say, hey, I'm not pulling up to this game. But like Kershaw did, Kershaw could have just said, trade me. But no, what did he do? He fought
That's right.
to be like, hey, you see the fruit in what that was. Let me bring Christians in and see the fruit of this. And I think time will tell the truth as we stand in that place where we're able to disagree, but then create those conversations. And so to me, I feel like people, communities, whatever we want to label as like the worst of the worst, they're one conversation away from their life being completely changed.
Yeah.
And so that's what I want to stand in.
Well, I think what's interesting is like, you know, and I believe and the thing I try to always be aware, because I used to be the most religious zealot to ever exist because I was fully reformed and just completely, I mean, like I just, you know, if you could be a far right zealot, that was me in every way, right? Which I'm not anywhere near that nowadays. And I think one of the reasons why I'm not is because I started realizing more and more how much of a hypocrite I was, which goes exactly to Jesus's teaching, right? Like, man, you know, before you point out someone else's speck, take the log out of your eye. Like I was the definition of that. Like I was really good at spotting specks in people's eyes, like so good at it. And I had the best criticisms for everyone. And I had the best criticisms on why people aren't following Jesus good enough and why no one loves him and why no one reads their Bible and why I do it the best and why I'm pursuing God the best. And it's so easy.
Because he went to Masters.
To do,
I played.
But he's back. He's back.
I know,
We're
right?
good. We're good.
It's so easy to do that. But then when I started like evaluating other areas in my life, other wounds that I was like babying that I didn't want no one to know about, that I was like so easy to look at a Sean and be like, you know, well, that's cowardice. That it's just because you love the game more than you love God. You know, that's what someone would say. And it's like, you know, well, you know, let's talk about you in your own life. Like, let's get in your business now. Let's say you're making that criticism and you're a female. Well, the Bible says that women don't adorn yourself with fancy jewelry as to expose yourself and as to flaunt yourself. And we know in context that's not fully what it's mean.
Right.
But if you want to go just totally braggadocious, then I could say, what if your hairdresser is part of the LGBTQ? Do you not go to that hairdresser anymore? How do you know that shirt you bought in Zara wasn't designed by someone in the LGBT community? That makeup you're letting someone put at Mac on you to test.
What restaurants are you eating at? You know what I mean? That you never know.
Yeah, so let me guess, you only eat at Chick-fil-A. Right. Is that what you only, it's like, no. So there are areas in your life, you know, you drink a Coke. Coke does gay pride Coca-Colas.
Yeah. Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
like, so you're giving up on Coke product. Like, how far do you want to take that? Because it's really easy to be like, oh, I would have, if it were
Exactly.
me and I was a fan of the Dodgers, I wouldn't be one anymore. So, you know, glad to see you're still at the early stages of your faith, Sean. When you take Jesus a little more
Right,
serious, you'll start making the bigger decisions of what it means to not be worldly. And it's like, I think one of the greatest stretches of scripture is how people define what worldly is and what worldly isn't.
Right.
Like, I think that is such a deviation, and so, like, because what's funny is there's a pastor who's he's a little older. He's kind of world famous for being one of the more stricter pastors in terms of biblical. So he doesn't believe women could teach and preach, and he doesn't believe gifts are active today, and he's very famous for having those standards. But what a lot of people don't know is, because at his church he has a very strict eldership process, his head elder is a plastic surgeon. I mean, he inputs bigger boobs for a living.
Wow.
You know, like,
Gotta love that.
and he's his top giver. You know.
Oh, that's even more.
And this guy is this guy's world famous for being the most conservative, biblical, fundamentalist Christian. But when I tell some people who quote this guy all the time, I'd be like, do you know his head elder is a plastic surgeon? Like, he shapes women's vaginas and boobs for a living and makes money doing that. Do you think that's okay? Well, no. And again, I'm not saying I hold a position to it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying we all got a spec. We all got a log. And when they hear that, they're like, wait. And then now they're starting to fight because that hit home. And I'm like, you're quoting a pastor whose head elder does implants for a living. Like, a man who's married looks at other women's boobs for a living and their private parts. And he does men's nose and all. But let's just be real. Who's majority of the time going and getting plastic surgery, right? They're getting butt lifts. They're getting, you know, all those things like that. This guy does that for a living. And then he's also on their radio program. That held elder also teaches sermons. So I'd be like, how do you feel about that? Because once it starts going into someone's own world, and now you have to start reconcile. Like, you could say, Adam, you just make a decision on Disney. I'm like, well, make a decision about this right now.
Right. Yeah.
Come on. Like, if we're going to have the conversation, let me understand what's important to you. And let me get in your business a little bit. And then unless you're going to go lock yourself in a closet and you're going to do research and see only Christian-only brands, which I don't think the New Testament ever had intentions to teach that. I don't think the Old Testament ever had intentions to do that. You know, you spoke about Esther, which, you know, as far as my study takes me, most theologians believe that when they were trained to go see Artaxerxes, that they were sleeping with him. That's why they were taking baths in roses and all. It was like they're cleaning their private parts because So when Esther impressed him, she impressed him with her ability to how she has sex. Like, that's part of what impressed him. There would have been other things, but like, he was most impressed by the way that she pleased him. And it's like, well, he wasn't married. He was married. He had a wife, and then she wasn't married, right? And it's like, by in detail, we know scripturally that's morally wrong. But you see within that thread how God used that to redeem the Jewish people. From when her uncle Mordecai, and obviously when they were going to try to kill off all the Jews, and Haman ended up getting hung. And so, like, all I say is, like, when I point those things out is God is in the world as much as we are in the world.
That's right.
And the scripture makes a difference to say that we're in it but not of it. And that's a difference. There's a difference to being in it and of it. There's a difference between saying, I'm not going to that game, to being that's you being in it. Being of it would be like, yo, I'm gonna go, and that's just my team. I'm gonna go buy a jersey for that night with the flag on it and everything. And you're like, well, it's my team. Now you're becoming of it. Like, there's an adoption of certain beliefs that you're taking with it. And so, but we just automatically think that it's just when we talked about before here, like recently on like secular music and stuff like that. What defines that as that? Like, is just because they don't say I'm Christian or say God in the song, it makes it secular. It's like, no, because you can read the Song of Solomon, you know, and you can, for all intents and purposes, say that's a secular book, but it's not. It's got God's handiwork and love and stuff like that. And so Esther doesn't mention the word God at all in the book, but we see God's hand within the whole story. So that's why it's canonized in the scriptures.
Yeah.
So it's just, I think we're so black and white,
Yeah.
but some of these things have more nuance in them.
Yeah, dude. I mean, in light of what you're talking about, like, as a pastor, being a hypocrite, learning that we have issues that we don't see about ourselves. If it's okay with you, Adam, when I was thinking about Sean coming on, Sammy coming on, and you and me, we're all like in our 30s, right? And we're no longer, I'm assuming most of us, if not all of us, went into pastoral ministry in our 20s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not like yet in our 40s and 50s, but we've been in the game 10 plus years. I actually wanted to have a conversation on like finishing well.
Yeah.
Because I just feel like I'm curious as younger guys who are no longer the younger ones, but we're not the older ones.
Yeah.
And over the last several years for me, I'm seeing like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Like it used to be once a year, then like half a year, and now it's like
Once a month.
once a month to once a week for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then for me, it's also my mentors, people who've walked with me, and these are men I've looked up to. And I think,
Well, I want you to finish too, but even for me as a pastor too, I even in lay people who aren't pastors, I've seen an increase of affairs and infidelities and
more
addictions.
failures,
Like,
Yeah.
so when people, I want you to finish, but like, as we look at pastoral leaders or church leaders, I've seen an increase even more so of even lay people as well that are falling into these temptations as well.
yeah.
You know?
So I mean, when you're talking about like, you're realizing like, man, I was calling these people out, but I'm realizing I have a freaking log in my eye.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So like, as we're here as like younger pastors, why do you guys think this happens more regularly? Right? That's Adam's security guard right there.
Don't worry about it. We're good.
Like, why do you think it happens, and what do you think we need to do to safeguard ourselves so like that 10 years later, 15 years later, we're not going through that?
Yeah, I mean, I would start by asking the question, like, is it happening more? Or are people's lives just getting more exposed? Because, I mean, I've heard horror stories from 50s, 60s, 70s, traveling preachers coming home, beating their wives, drunk every night, just nobody knew about it. There was no social media. They weren't getting exposed like that back then. So, I mean, that's where I would start is like, is it actually happening more? Or are we just actually being more accountable in the world that we live in? And that's where I would want to start.
Everybody
the
has a
conversation.
voice box.
that's
Everybody
where I
has
would wanna
social
start
media.
it.
Everybody, you know, all 50% of divorces quote Facebook in some way, type of way as a reason why getting their divorce. And so, everybody has a platform nowadays. Whether you got 2 followers, you know, or 20,000.
What's funny was I was gonna ask that question too. Like, why are we seeing? But you obviously, the Yoda did it better, you know. In the question, I was just gonna say, why are we seeing an increase of people falling in ministry? Like I talked to you about it. Like we think back to 2017, 16, 15. There's a lot of people in the last 5 to 7, 8 years that are heroes, and a lot of times it's like, oh, one pastor fell, and everyone's like, I expected that. And then someone like a Ravi falls, or what's happening with IHOP, like stuff like that. And then people are like, oh, whoa. So 2 things I was thinking
I
of.
just found out about the IHOP thing too.
Yeah.
I'm not really
Wow.
connected with In and Outs of Prayer, but
we could talk. We could talk a little bit about it. Will knows the most. 2 things that I was thinking about in that question. Again, I don't have the corner on it, but one was from a conversation we had with pastors with Pastor Bayless Conley, Cottonwood Church. We got to sit with him, and he was talking about the ways of God, and he was just saying, isn't it funny in the ways of God? Jesus started his ministry at 30. Like, he was around sick people, and he wasn't in a rush. And so the 2 words actually, as I was driving up here from Huntington Beach, I was thinking about pace and grace. And I feel like currently right now, we want to be in the fastest pace. It's just human nature. I think social media has done it to us. And I think it was the Jesuits that said, our most influential decade of our life is our 60s. I think our second is our 50s, and then our third is our 70s. So our most influential time in our life is 50 to 70, with 60 being the number 1 decade. But we feel, especially in the Western world, that we got to get our stuff together in our 20s and even now in our teens.
And a lot of people in their 60s feel like they're being sent to the pasture.
Exactly, but not realizing you're in your best place. So I think, one, it's the pace that people are running. And then the other one is I feel like grace. And I feel like a lot of times it's very popular, 80s, 90s, the healing movement, 80s, 90s, early 2000s. It was all about, I feel like, butts and seats, meaning how can you go faster? I want to launch, if I'm launching a church, I want to launch with 1,000, and then next year 5,000.
Field of dreams mentality, build it, they will come.
Exactly. And I think what's happened is our vision has outrun our grace over our life. And I feel like we haven't asked ourselves this question, God, what grace do I have over my life to carry? Do I have 1 talent, 3 talents, 5, 10? That's a crazy way to think, but it's more like, God, are you just giving me a grace for two blocks? That's all I want to carry. Are you giving me a grace for a region, a city? That's all I want to carry. Are you giving me a grace to go nationally, globally? And I think what happens is our vision outruns our grace. And then what happens is we medicate with whatever it is, whether it's addiction, social media, improper relationships. And so I think it's, one, recognizing what pace are we running at? And then 2, what's the grace God's called over my life? Last thing I'll say, I'll give it to someone else, is I think it was Bill Johnson. He said this. He went over to, this was early days, Bill Johnson. He went over to a nation in Asia, and he came back, and he said, man, it was the first time I ever felt I was more famous than anointed. And he said, I never want that to happen again.
Wow.
And I think we want the fame. And
Asians, dude.
No, it wasn't Asian. It was the white people.
On audio, Will is Asian, so don't cancel him. He's allowed to say that.
Yeah. He's Asian. But I feel like it's easy to run at pace, want to be famous, want to have this big vision to make room for a lot of people, field of dreams mentality, versus, man, God, I want your anointing, and I want to carry a grace over my life to do whatever it takes. So
Yeah, I think that's the tough part, is part of it, what you said, but the big thing in there, because at least what I'm seeing from myself or a lot of people, is like we don't realize how, and I've always respected when I first met Will, how he was like, there's a season in my life I had to give up social media, and he completely gave it up, didn't have anything, didn't have an account, then he creates it, comes on Beyond the Letter. First video goes
like
20 million, 20 million people or whatever, which it's funny what God does.
I love it.
God be making jokes. But I always respected when I first heard that from Will, because I'm like, oh man, that's dope. Because that does, in today's age, that does take a lot of discipline. To just be like, I'm totally walking away from social media. Because I think social media, as it is a great medium, it's a great way to stay connected with people. I mean, I am the tech guy. There's like nobody believes in tech more than me. In the church for sure. But also it's a very dangerous world, and we don't realize it, how much we compare ourselves and our lives, but also how much we can hide our life through social media. And many of the social media companies purposely make ways and rhythms in which you can keep secrets and hide things. And I mean, that's only benefiting a person who now begins to be tempted. The amount of relationships outside of a person's marriage that forms within social media, that starts with just a comment or a like or a DM. Like it's not that temptation is harder. To Sean's point, like it's not maybe that it's happening more. It's just the fact that temptation is far more easily accessible today than it was 50 years ago. 50 years ago, like if you're a preacher who, or even a person who has a job, you want to fool around. I mean, you got 3 or 4 people in your office. A lot of those preachers back then, it was like their assistant or someone that was in very close proximity, right? And then today you have stuff that's like, a person they met at a coffee shop and then followed on Instagram later on, and then start, you look at Carl Litz's situation. He was, whatever was he doing, walking the dog in the park, and then he DM'd her or something like that. I mean, it's just how it forms, and then you can use social media as like a little way just to feel, and so that temptation, it hits you. And then what you're also doing, I mean, I remember one time, there was a couple who had was going to marriage counseling with me. I was trying to think of the way, because I do so much counseling. I'm like, was it premarital? It was marriage counseling. And every once in a while, if I'm doing marriage counseling, I'll just look up that couple just to get an idea if I don't know who they are.
Right.
If I'll get an idea of who they are. So I'll just type their name in Facebook or Instagram just to kind of get an idea before they pop in. What are they like? So the night before, I'm popping this family, and there's a post by the husband and the wife, and it's a family picture, and it's, I'm so thankful for my husband, and the husband's commenting, "I love you, babe, blah blah blah, you're the best." And they're coming into marriage counseling with me the next day, and I find out like the husband 5 months prior had an affair, and like their marriage is completely broken. Like she's telling me I don't respect him and this and that, and I'm thinking, you just did a post yesterday that I just saw.
Yep.
And so there's this disassociation of this reality, that the life that we live, and then the reality we're trying to portray. And then on top of that, you're looking at that person's life, and then you're saying like, oh my, because even that moment I was like, oh, I haven't done a post about my wife in a while. And then I go in the meeting next day, I'm like, why am I even using someone else's post on when was the last time I posted my wife, when their marriage is struggling? My marriage is not struggling like that. It's not perfect, but it's not struggling in that moment. So I'm like, why did I look at a post? It provoked me of like, well, what about you, Adam? And how often as spouses or people do we like point something to our husband or wife and be like, when was the last time you took me to Disneyland? I'm like, you don't know why they're taking their family to Disneyland. You know, that he could be the husband or wife could be apologizing for something. It could be, he could have got a raise at work. There's a million reasons on why that family went, but we look at social media or we look at another pastor online and then we start getting, we're like, man, well, that pastor's killing it. Yeah. Look at him. I'm relatively his same age. Why am I not? Because look how many likes or comments there are. But you don't know that half his staff quit the week before because they don't want to work with him anymore. Like you don't know any of that stuff. We just know what we've seen. So therefore, when that seed gets sown into us, and then we actually start believing those things that we see or that we need it or my life's not like that, then you start going, well, maybe I need to create, instead of now relying on the Lord and what he's called you to do and what he's led you to do. Now I think maybe I need to start building it myself. Maybe I need to make changes and do this the way that I want to do it. Or maybe I am unhappy. So instead of finishing well in my marriage, maybe I'll start thinking about, I'm not happy in my marriage. And that's where a lot of the pastors get in trouble, because what I've seen is I've met 6 pastors who have fallen, and I've talked to them in person, 4 of which I got in arguments with that had nothing to do with what they got in trouble for, but they were a very rude and bitter person. And I'm a person that doesn't really take too well to rude and bitterness. And so they, 4 of those 6 guys that I met that I had negative interactions with ended up having moral failures within the years after. And one of the things that I saw in common with sometimes the only few hours I was around them was, number one, they were extremely isolated.
I agree.
So they had no relationships. They were very, they would call it loneliness or depression or whatever. But to me, that was kind of an excuse to why you don't feel like you don't, sorry, I'm not talking to anyone, I'm lonely or I'm depressed. It was an excuse of what they were trying to do to isolate. And so they're isolating. And then on top of that, they treat people poorly.
Poorly, that's right. Jensen and I were just talking about that on the way up here. Like, even the way that Will was texting, was it Nancy? I was like, man, that's why I love Will. Like, this dude respects people. He values them. He knows their name. He takes the time. And I agree with you in that. Like, those are 2 telltale signs for me. I've got a couple of mentors in my life that are finishing well into their 70s.
That's huge to have that.
And what I've seen them build from a young age is accountability. Like, and not accountability in the way of like, because here's the danger, Adam, is like, you can be isolated and pretend like you're not.
For sure.
And what I mean by that is like, a lot of these guys that I see fall, they force themselves back in, and they do it by way of ministry friendships that aren't really friendships. They're more about the way they serve each other, and there's nothing that person could really say to them to correct them or guide them or lead them. And so they'll be like, these are the people that stood by me. And I'm like, of course they did, because like, you put each other on. But like,
and half of them have the same moral failures you did. So of course they're.
But what about that mentor that's 15, 20 years older than you, that can like call you out on the hard things in front of the people you lead privately. And then I also think like one thing I found for me personally that I've mimicked from my like spiritual father is when I travel with people I'm discipling.
Yeah.
And the reason I do that is because it reminds me that I'm teaching them in everything that I do.
That's good.
Because like we got to go to the grocery store. We're going to get delayed on a flight.
Yep.
I'm going to get a waiter that's rude, and they're going to see how I interact with those people.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I'm discipling them in that more than when I'm speaking on the stage. And so we were just talking about that, Jensen and I, and that's something I value about you, Will. Like I see you treat people with respect, dignity, honor. Even people that haven't honored you. You don't talk badly about pastors that have treated you disrespectfully. I've seen people be bitter towards you, frustrated towards you, and you don't publicly like defame them. You honor them. Now you can disassociate, right? And you're not going to let those people just continue to do that. But I agree with you, like that isolation. But isolation is so tricky because a lot of those people that are really isolated, they look
they could
like
easily
they're not.
they could easily be isolated and be like, "Yo, are we all going to dinner after this?" I mean, there is a bit of fraudness that we can play if you're good with people for sure. Yeah. So to me, it's how a person treats people that aren't their people.
Yep.
Ooh, come on.
That's what I tell the difference because the individuals I'm speaking of, none of those people was I their people. So that's why I was treated poorly. Because I was in the room and they're talking to their other pastors. Oh, they're doing this and your shoes and and then I come in and they're like, oh, maybe someone invited me in and they're like, oh, this is Adam, and then they're like, what's up, man?
Yeah.
And I'll be like, oh man, I loved your book that you did, blah blah blah. And they're like, okay. Once there's two specific stories, but one specific story was I said this in a sermon one time because it's pretty funny. So happened 3 years ago. There was a pastor who's very famous, and two of my other friends, and you would know the other friends, which they're not part of the story in the sense of negatively, but two other pastor friends, they were like, yo, when you go to this conference, this pastor that's speaking is very famous. They're like, go tell him hi and tell him you're our friend. Like he'll totally, and you all know that's how you do it. That's how you create a new friendship. I go, hey man, you're like, I just recently met someone who's actually on staff at Overflow. That's connected to you guys. He's in New York. He works at Overflow with Vance Roush.
Jonathan Koo.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he's talking to me for maybe 10 minutes and I'm engaging, but then in a moment he goes, man, and Will that community was my pastor, and we're being mentored by them and stuff, like, not to say too much, but immediately then I even open up more because I'm like, oh, you're Will's boy, you're connected. My gosh, now family. We have a commonality. Like like before we were just getting to know each other. Now I know if you're Will's friend, and let's go deeper now. So that's what you do. So I went up to this pastor at the end of him preaching. I was like, hey, man, it's so great to meet you. Great word today. I just want to let you know, Pastor so-and-so and so-and-so told me to tell you hi. I'm really close with them, and they said you're one of their best friends. And I swear to God, he looks at me and he goes, I don't care.
Whoa.
And I was like, oh.
You're like, you don't know who you just said that to.
You don't know who you said that to. That was literally what I was thinking just
You're like,
now.
get the dog.
Oops. So, and you all know me. So in that moment, and I can easily, I'm a bigger guy. I have a very strong personality. I'm always easily the bad guy for people. So I always try to lean towards being very soft, very gracious, unless it's like there's nothing I could do about it. So in that moment, I'm just like, oh, yeah, well, they just wanted me to say hi, because now I don't know how to follow. I don't know what to say to follow up. So then he's like, okay, bye. And I'm like, all right, bet. So I walk away.
You walk away.
Like,
That's
I'm hot, bro.
Good
My
job.
wife's, he does it in front of my wife.
Oh, no, he does not.
Yeah, dude.
Uh-oh.
I mean, so I walk away just hot. Never even told because I was the pastor who was putting on the conference. I was invited by him just to come and hang because I was in town. And so never told that pastor what the interaction was like or anything like that. So mind you, during COVID, this pastor has a leadership failure. He lost his church, lost his fame, all that stuff. So now he's doing what you just mentioned.
Yep.
He's reaching out to his close friends.
Yep.
Trying to still make a living, preach at churches, but he lost. The dude had like 10 church campuses, very, very well known. And 3 months ago, one of my dad's mutual friends says, hey, my pastor friend so-and-so will be in town. He's great. Would you ever like to have him preach at your church? So my dad texts me, screenshots the person's text message. My dad's like, hey, do you know who this guy is? I said, because my dad's not really hip into the church world. So he didn't,
You're like, oh yeah, I heard him. Send him to my office.
yeah. So I say, yes, I'm aware of him. And then my dad said, so what do you think? Would you like to have him? Because we're in a transition. So my dad kind of laterals every final decision to me.
Yeah.
He's like, would you like to have him? I don't know who he is. But this friend who's extremely credible is recommending him. And I said, yes, I do know him. And here's what my altercation was with him. And so I text my dad, this is what he did to me at a conference. And my dad responded, say no more. I'll take care of it.
Uh-oh.
Dude, he calls his friend and he's like, hey, he'll never be at our church. With the way that he treated my son. And his friend now he's apologetic. You know, he was like that. I don't think he's like that anymore. He had a lot of pride. God has humbled him. And basically my dad was like, well, you know, you guys are his friends. You guys can walk him through the discipleship process however you want and restoration process. But as for us, like, as long as he has that between my son, there's not going to be a relationship. And he's like, I respect that. And I even told my dad, this guy had so much pride, he wouldn't even remember that altercation more than likely. Like, even if you brought it up, he'd be like, oh, that happened? Because when you do it so frequently, and it just becomes part of your personality, how you treat people, you don't even remember, you know, what you did or who you said something to, because it just happens so much. And to me, it's like, I'm like, there's no way with that personality that other people who had a voice in that person's life did not see that and just refused to speak on it.
Absolutely.
And that's part of the problem, is when you let someone's either platform or you let their gift outweigh their ability to be held accountable, then now you, to a degree, also, you're not responsible to clean up their act, but I do believe there is a responsibility to call out. Call it out when you see it, and then let them decide.
Hey, I'm proud of you though for not, throwing some hands.
Because I know other stories of mine where I didn't act that way.
Let's go.
I think the reason why this is so like sobering though is like, I feel like the ones who have, I guess the word would be like disqualified from ministry, they probably thought the same things we're saying. They probably said the same things we're saying. And I think it's sobering for me just seeing it happen so frequently and regularly. And to like all your guys' comments, I think it is true that it's always happened. I thought about John Wesley, how his wife said, I cursed John Wesley with every curse from Genesis to Revelation. You know that?
I didn't know that.
She was like, he was the worst husband ever.
I'm going to tell my circle rider fan that.
He's still a legend, bro. I still honor what he did for God.
But isn't that amazing, though? I mean, you look at David. You're like, the dude's a cheater and murderer.
And then to what you're saying, I think it's just happening with lay people too. Even right now, this morning, my personal devotionals, I'm reading through 1 Kings. And I just forget, like at least I'm looking like the first 15 chapters, every king is falling. It's like he did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did what was evil. He did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not walk in the...
He kept the commandments. Hezekiah and Josiah,
And then like this morning, for the first time in a while, like in the first 15 chapters, like Asa comes out and says, finally, he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and he followed after the footsteps of his father David. So I'm seeing like, yes, it's lay people, but there's just some type of accountability that goes to when the leader falls. Everyone just gets affected by that, and church after church. And one of the things I've been thinking about is like, we need to not just think about falling sexually, but there's so many other components to how we can fall as spiritual leaders, right? There's financial abuse, there's power structure, there's power abuse. there's relational abuse, there's family abuse, there's one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is like plateauing, right? How it says in the time when kings were supposed to go to war,
Right.
David didn't go.
Yep.
And it was the plateauing and the pride that gave room for the other sins. And for the first time, David's like, I'm good. I'm gonna let my people die.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be safe in this throne, in this kingdom. And he plateaued in his spiritual growth and his leadership growth because he thinks he knows it all, which leads to like other falls as well. And for me, it's just been really interesting, man. Because like mentors and leaders I've looked up to, and it's just happening.
Yeah.
It is happening. So
Well, we were talking about this, I think it was this week. So I got background with Youth with a Mission. I did 15 years in YWAM. Lauren Cunningham, the founder, just passed away. But he would tell us that he started with a few hundred of these guys and only a handful finished well.
Wow.
And I think that what happens is in the Bible, it says you were running well. Who hindered you from believing the truth? And it's about, the enemy doesn't even, the devil's not scared of us starting well. It's about finishing well, which is the question you asked.
Yeah.
And I think what you pointed out, we all talked about is who is your accountability group? Are they boys of yours that you have something for them, they have something for you? Your accountability group you should be friends with, but who are the fathers, who are the brothers, and like you said, who are the sons, who are the people you're pouring into that has access to your life, right? Jesus, he said, follow me, kept walking. And I think a lot of times it's popular to say, hey, I'm a disciple you 1 hour a week, and that's totally fine. Our life is busy. But are people seeing your life? Are they seeing your day-to-day? Are they seeing how you talk to waitresses and waiters? Are they seeing how you act on airplanes and all those different things? And then I think what you said, which was powerful, is there's such an addiction to attention, and I think that's what social media has given us that access, versus I feel like a conviction to assignment. Yeah. And I feel like what happens is that guy, that story you shared, he said, okay, and then just left. It's because he didn't see you of value. He didn't know that you had what you had. But now he knows someone else linked him, and he would either forget about it or he'd say, I'm so sorry, I had a bad day, I didn't have my coffee. But the truth is that how are we treating people that have nothing for us? Yeah. And I think for us is that, and then also maybe not even saying that, is that realizing that everyone around us has something for us. That we're able to say, I want to receive from a child to someone who's a mentor and someone who has written 20, 30, different books. So to me, I think finishing well, one of the things is make sure your friends aren't just people that are struggling with your same, struggles and sins. And then another key one, if you're married, is ask your spouse, speak into my life, what are you seeing? And,
for sure.
And I don't need to.
And they ain't gonna hold back. They're gonna be like, I'm glad you asked.
And
Let me pull out my journal.
and so I just think, and I'll give it to you, is that who's asking your spouse, asking a mentor, leader, a father, ask your kids. And then I think it's just about realizing this. Finishing well is a lot harder than we could even think. And so even look at your life and look at your last month, your last year. Where are struggles? Where are cracks in the armor? And what are things that could take you out? And being like, yo, hold me accountable. And being able to walk with people in that way. And just really realizing not a crazy fear, but a healthy fear and conviction to say, man, I want to finish well, so I'm going to be able to do whatever it takes to run that race. But I would say it is crazy. It feels like almost a pastor a week. We're starting to see that they're more a failure or some kind of failure. But I do feel like it's a shaking of things that are getting ready to take place. And there's a changeover in leadership that, hey, if you don't deal with it one-on-one, it's going to be shouted from the rooftops.
I think I want to ask Sean, just because Sean's with us, is like, because what I'm hearing is like we need spiritual fathers, we need friends, and then we need disciples, and we need them equally, right? So it's not out of balance. Because if you only have fathers, people under you aren't going to see how you're living, and you don't have friends to call you out. But if you only have friends, for you talking about like having disciples come with you, because I've seen you too. Like Sean rolled deep. Like he rolls with like disciples. He even brought Jensen here to say, "Hey, come with me." Do you let your disciples call you out? How do you go about that? And then what is your thought process of, I need them here, even for my own spiritual growth? Because most people think I'm discipling you, I'm in a relationship with you because you need to grow. But what I'm seeing you saying is, no, I need to be in a relationship with my disciple, even for my own spiritual growth. I kind of want to hear what you think about.
Yeah, I think it goes back to like your plateau comment. I think spiritual laziness often creeps in by the inability to celebrate other people. Having young disciples around me helps me learn to celebrate things that I've stopped celebrating. When they preach for the first time, when I see them grow, when I see them counsel someone, when I see them make a hospital visit, when I see them do deliverance with someone, when I see them counsel the first time, it stirs in me the faith of my youth and reminds me to celebrate what God is doing through them. What I often find, Will, is that people that are leaning into this not finishing well, their plateau often comes in their inability to celebrate other people. So like one thing I do is like, and not to like hype anybody up, but like what I do is like when I'm away, I'll go find a church that doesn't know me, doesn't know who I am, has no connection to me, and I'll just go fellowship at that church. And my wife will tell me like, hey, there are times where we're going to go away and you're not going to call your friends to preach. You're not going to, you're just going to go to a church and act like nobody knows you. And you're not going to do anything to make yourself known to anyone. And you're just going to worship and you're going to serve the Lord and you're going to get fed and you're going to celebrate other people. And if afterwards they realize you were there, praise God for that. But you're just going to be dad, you're going to be husband, we're going to worship together, and you're going to learn to celebrate this. And what I found is that building that rhythm into my life, where I do that like at least once a quarter when I'm away with my wife, it helps me, Will, to remember to celebrate when I'm at home, to celebrate the other leaders. Because like, yeah, I've been in churches where, you know, leaders will go like, yeah, we have a plurality of eldership. We share leadership. We're raising up young leaders. And I'm like, man, they only preach when you're not here.
Right.
You're not empowering anyone when you're when you're in the room. It's only when you're not in the room.
Yeah.
And so I want to sit and I want to celebrate what God is doing through them. I want to learn. I want to grow in it. And then what that allows me to do is it allows me to remember that the discipler relationship is for both and. Right? I'm there to stir them, and they're there to remind me of the goodness of God. Now, there's not much that, like Jensen, for example, has taught me about like the Bible or theology or my praxis or some of those things. But what he reminds me of is the truth of God's word. And he stirs that faith in my youth and just, he helps it be real to me. Because here's what I find with like the plateau. And this is where like I often, when pastors come to me like, I feel like I'm plateauing. I feel like this is happening. You know, they come to me, my spiritual father. We counsel, we lead. A lot of those pastors is they'll go, I've lost my love for being in the Word or being with Jesus. I've made everything I do about my profession and doing it for other people. I've lost my devotion time. I've lost my worship. I've lost these things. And I'm like, dude, just be an amateur. Rediscover the love for it. Love of, right? Begin to do it for the love of, and do it by stepping out of it and serving others in it again. And so I think that's how I live it out, is just a reminder of like, they're not there to serve me. Like, they're not there to just get my coffee and hold my bags and hold, you know, I'm my armor bearer, hold my Bible. But I'll like work them in. I'll give them space, right? I'll encourage them along the way. And then they're there to remind me, like, Sean, you were once here and you were passionate about everything your mentors were saying to you. And that keeps my heart stirred for the Lord.
That's good, man. That's really good. I'm just thinking how to keep our heart fresh, right? Because again, we're not older like vets in the 50s. But we're not in our 20s.
Many of us started at teenagers.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. And so
many of us, all four of us. Yeah.
And it's just, it's just interesting, man. He's seeing you guys as boys. Like, I hope, and I really hope, and I believe it.
Yeah.
When we're 55, we're sitting like this, like, yo, we're still in it, baby.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying?
And that it's harder, and it's not that it's less and less nowadays, because I like how Sean put it. So it's not that it's more; it's that you just see it more. But well, and here's part of the reality is there is more people statistically getting out of full-time ministry today, period. Right. So that statistic does exist. So there is an element where there are a lot of us who, and maybe people who listen to this podcast, where you have a lot of skill and a lot of talent, and then the wall that hits you becomes so hard that you just say, I could do this somewhere else. like many of us doing full-time ministry, we could go make a living outside of doing ministry. So when it gets hard and it gets tough, many guys our age nowadays are just being like, dude, I could go start a marketing company tomorrow. I mean, that was before my dad chose me as successor, that I was wrestling with that because I was making 4 times as much as I was making as a youth pastor running a marketing company. And I had a big insurance client who wanted to hire me on, where the company was going to do $3 million in the first year. Sheesh. And obviously I'd have to hire employees and stuff, but still, and I'm sitting there and I'm going, bro, I don't even make 10% of that as a youth pastor. Right. And I got to call this company right now and say, it's not a good season. We were bidding for contracts. My contract got chosen. Actually, I'm not you should go with the second choice because it's not a good time for me and my company. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm telling my wife, did I just make the biggest mistake of my life? But in order to do that job, I would have had to take at least 1 year to 2 years off of full-time ministry. But I understand if you're hitting a wall and you realize not just financially, but in other ways, you're like, dude, I don't have to have another person tell me that they hate me or that my theology was wrong or get another letter from an angry member about how the sound was too loud or the sound was too low or the concrete was cracked when they walked, like whatever, I can go on for hours of the, you get a lot of encouragement, but you also get a lot of, there are some people who think that they're the only people that exist. So I could see why a person would be like, I don't want to do that anymore. But reminding, I think you said it, Will, or something like that, like reminding yourself of what you're called to, like what you said yes to, or maybe you said it, Sammy, of like talking about that commitment that you made to finish well, to say like, God, you didn't, at least for us, you didn't change that capacity. But I think there's other people that can learn from that, in the sense we talk about it a lot nowadays, that statistically, for some of us that may be on the older side of millennials, they won't fit this category, but anyone that's Gen Z and Gen Alpha, they say anyone that's Gen X and a baby boomer, by time they retire, they're going to have 2 to 3 jobs in their life. So that's it, 2 to 3 jobs.
Wow.
They said when a Gen Xer retires when they're 60, they're going to have 27 to 35 jobs in their entire life. So in
crazy
2 generations,
Makes
you
sense.
went from your entire life 2 to 3 jobs to 27 jobs. There's a couple things.
Oh, that's very insightful.
It shows us that when we don't like something, or when we're not happy, or when we and I don't necessarily have a total criticism. Pursue what you want to, find what you're good at, but at the same time, like if you just keep seeing yourself in this kind of roundabout circle, you're like, oh, I'm not happy again. Well, I'll go leave it, and I'll leave it. What you are teaching yourself is, well, I'm not happy in this marriage. I'll leave it. I'll go to a new marriage. And then you're like, well, I don't like this marriage. I'll leave this one and I'll go to this marriage. And then I don't like this job. I'll leave it. And so I think even young millennial, we be susceptible to that, or young Gen X pastors are going to have that same experience where they're going to be like, I don't like this church. I'll try this church. I don't like this thing. It's an overall, and to me, what adds to that is social media. Social media adds to that, but also opportunity and options add to that, which there are more on the table today than there was 20, 30 years ago, in the sense of what a person can make a career out of. You know, someone can look at TikTok and just wear a dress and make a whole career out of just backing up and saying, you like the dress, click the link in my bio, and they're making $200,000 a year.
Crazy.
So someone looks at it and goes like, well, I'll try it. And then they hit the lottery and then they could do it. And so there's so many different options that then they say, and then when that doesn't become a thing anymore, I'll find a new thing and then a new thing. And so even in ministry, I think that's going to be a reality of struggle. I know personally a lot of pastors right now who aren't pastors anymore that are just they run coffee shops now, and they're successful, but they run coffee shops now. They own consulting agencies now, because you got to think about it. We pastor people, we have systems and practices every single week. So a lot of times in the church world, we are most celebrity singers have a foot in the door when they were young in the church. Almost all the great ones say, oh, I started singing in church. there is a system in the church that builds people fast,
it
and they
does.
build them quick,
Yep.
and you get to do it weekly. Whether nowadays, whether you're taking pictures at your church, whether you're taking video at your church, I mean, you could become an audio professional if you start helping at your church in 3 years. For
sure.
Because you're practicing every week, and then now they go, "Hey, pastor, I'm not going to be serving on Sundays anymore because I got a gig traveling with Bono. I'm his new audio guy." And you think, well, I'm happy for you, but you learned a lot of it here, and we gave you the release to do it, and you should make a career out of that.
Yeah.
But I'd say if you're moving, I encourage you, don't forget where you started.
Yeah,
Don't forget
good.
the Lord. Don't forget where God has. Don't forget that you, man, who's a great pastor and communicator, it's because another pastor believed in you and gave you an opportunity to speak on stage and to get better and to let you do an offering or an exhortation, or you sing, or your pastor or the leader said, "Hey, yeah, you sing, keep doing it," that all of a sudden you don't go to church anymore because you made it, and you don't, and you got a great sales career because you got to share on stage at your church and stuff like. There's just a lot of rhythms that the church can really build in you, and it's very easy for us to say, like, you know, when I was in college, I was voted number one, like, public speaker or whatever in the thing, and I no longer
shocking. So shocking.
I was no longer allowed to compete in it because it was like speech class or whatever. So the teacher just basically said, "Hey, Adam, like, when you give your speech from now on, like, no one's allowed to vote for you because I just kept getting first place." And one day she pulled me aside and she's like, "Why are you, so good at it?" And I was like, "Well, my dad, ever since I was 8, would make me go on stage, and he would make me talk about tithing, or he would make, he might, a pastor, like, you just throw your kid up and you make him do anything, right?" And I said, and then my dad would just make me sit in the seat and watch him. I'd have to go in service. Sometimes I get to go to children's church, but sometimes he made me go in big church.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and then my dad, to me, who's one of the best communicators, I'm like, I just learned.
Yeah.
But I could have said to her, the kids just got it. It's natural talent. I just because I made it. I just, you know what I'm saying?
Baby.
Yeah, I'm
Come
self-made. But really, because she asked me how to think about it, I'm like, well, no, my dad encouraged it and taught it, would bring me on stage and put the mic in my head, and I would shake and whatever, and he'd say, "Hey, you're going to do it again next week, but let's go over it this week." And I'd be like, "Oh, okay." By the time you're 18, you're like, "Oh, I'm pretty confident in front of people."
Yeah.
And I could easily be like, "Yeah, that's all me." Or I could say, like, "No, someone took a chance on me. Someone encouraged me in this direction." And so before I just say, like, "Oh, I gained myself a new opportunity," I need to think, who's going to be laid in the crossfires of whatever
That's good.
decision I make. And I need to really pray, and then I need to do the process like we talked about. I need to talk to an elder, a sage in my life. I need to talk to my peers in my life. I need to talk to some people who I'm discipling. Hey, do you see this in me? I'm thinking about doing this. Well, how would you feel if I did that? What would that mean to you? And just allow that feedback to come in before we just allocate all our gifts, all our talents to ourselves. That's where Saul's pride came in, because there's always going to be someone better than you. Yeah. So Saul was good until he heard other people say he kills his thousands, but David kills his 10,000s. Saul was good until he heard other people say, there's someone that kills more people than you do, Saul. He was like good with 1,000.
That's why the celebration piece comes.
Until he heard someone kills more than me, 10,000s. Well, shoot, maybe I'll just kill him,
right?
Or maybe I'll just pursue my own flesh. I'll go see, someone who dabbles in sorcery, and I'll do, like you just start, you start crumbling.
You start doing things you never thought you would do.
Never.
And I think you look at Saul, he didn't know how to ebb and flow. And then you look at John the Baptist, he knew how to ebb and flow. So I think it's like you're talking about always carrying humility to remember your journey.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, remember who got you there. And then I think the other thing that's powerful that you just mentioned about Saul was, how are we able to ebb into a place? Are we okay with being at the front? And then are we okay with like someone else coming after us? Or do we always have to be that person that has all the attention? And I just think it's like, always remember who got you there, always shouting out your journey and all your past and all those things. Yeah. And also remembering how to bring people up with you. And when that process happens, being willing to be like, okay, I'm going to take a back seat. Like you said, I'm going to sit in the church and I'm not going to have to preach and I'm going to be there. Because I think a lot of times it's easy to be like, oh, I got to go preach. I'm going to have someone else preach. But how much does it mean to you? Remember the first time you preached and your mentor was in the front row shouting you down?
Yeah.
Like that meant so much versus, oh, can you preach, but your mentor's never there. And it just tells you, what does it tell you? Well, my mentor is there for me, but really only where I could help him out, but he's never going to be there shouting me down, but he expects me to be there to shout him down.
Yeah.
And I just think it's just about...
And I think that applies like if you're a dad,
Yep.
Your son and daughter, you can practice and play that out, right? If you're a spouse, you can practice and play that out, like, are you present?
Yep.
Yeah,
are you cheering them on?
It's definitely not a pastor thing. I think it's a metric thing.
Yep.
And I think like what you're seeing if I could just speak into like maybe why we see so many leaders like failing and not finishing well right now is their metric was, how do I do this for a lifetime? Not how do I work myself out of a job by raising up people that are better than me.
Yeah.
I think you could apply that to anything, coffee shop, whatever. And here's a danger that I see a lot in the church, not just with pastors, but people in general, is they treat calling like it's not a verb. And they're like, well, I got called. And so they're like, well, I have to pastor till I'm 83. And I'm like,
I'm at 45.
Jesus,
I already told my staff and the board, 45,
Jesus
I'm
is
out.
calling you like
assignment
every
driven.
day.
Yeah.
And he's calling you to new seasons.
That's right.
Like, let's take the whole scripture and look at that. And maybe your calling isn't to be a pastor your whole life.
Right.
But if your metric is always like, I remember when I was a youth pastor, like I thought I would be a youth pastor forever. I was down. I loved it. I didn't have grandeur to like, be an apostolic leader, plant churches and go to a fifth generation and do all that. I just want to love kids for Jesus. And then one day I had 45 young leaders around me that I was investing in, loving in, serving. And they were like, we got the lights, we got the sound, we got the parents, we got the preaching, we got the worship. And I was like, I have to quit because I worked myself out of a job. And then God was like, okay, here's a new level of leadership because you've been faithful with what I've given you. And now not only do you have people that are as good, if not better than you, but there are 45 of them, not just one of them. And I think so many ministries rise and fall on these leaders that's metric was like, let me serve God my entire life.
Yep.
And so you went through all these plateaus, you lost all these people, you never empowered leaders, and then you slowly killed what God gave you. And I mean, that is absolutely what you see with Saul.
Yeah.
And that comes from all kinds of things. Jealousy, secrecy. I mean, we can go into all that. But I think going back to what Sammy's saying, like, just that reality of, like, remembering the metric shift, going back to what you were saying, Adam, like, is it really even a bad thing that we end with that many jobs? Like, there's loyalty, commitment, and you want people not to just church hop, but get under a good leader. But at the same time, like, maybe some pastors do need a couple other jobs at a certain point. And I think, like, as long as you're discipling, apprenticing people, and your metric is like, Lord, let me work myself out of a job, then God will use you in whatever season he puts you in.
So good.
And that's how my 60s will be my best, I think.
Yeah,
that's what I want.
Come on.
One thing I want to say is, like, even the idea of calling, because I think pastors could get caught up like, I'm called. It's God's called me to do this. I've been thinking about it. You're just called to follow Christ.
Yeah, say that.
Like, your church is your job. Like, a doctor is a job, right? It's like, it's not who you are. And the moment you define yourself as what you do, you get into all types of trouble. And even Romans 8:28, like everyone's favorite verse, God works all things for the good for those who love him according to his purpose. And they say stuff like, oh, God's going to make this work well for me. I'm going to get a job. My church is going to grow. But the next verse, it defines what that good is. It says to be conformed into the image of Christ. So God is working all things in our lives, not for our good, but to make us like Christ. And that's what is good, right?
Yeah.
So even the idea of, like, for me too, is like, my calling is who I am, not what I do, and not to take my job or my ministry as my core sense of identity, which gets me all blinded. And that's with every, like you said, could be anybody, parents, doctors, jobs, spouses. It's like, no, all of this makes me more like Christ. And now I've defined it more as assignments. I have assignments in different seasons of my life, and I just got to steward that and move forward and becoming more like Christ.
But I think even in like a marriage, like you have going your perspective of like just saying, oh, I'm gonna be married for a lifetime, right? I won't be another statistic. Well, the marriage you have when you don't have kids is different than the one when you have kids. And actually the biggest hurdle that I found as a pastor and counseling people is the largest hurdle that people have is the empty nest season when all your kids go off to college. And what so many people try to fixate on is like, I just want to stay married. I just want to stay married without dealing with like, who is my spouse and what is my spouse with children? Who is my spouse and what is my spouse with an empty nest with children in college or children who will now get married and have their own Thanksgivings and have their own Christmases. And so many people end up getting into a difficult predicament because the idea of how you defined marriage when you first got married is going to be different when you empty nest, but you're trying to define it with the original framework that you committed to.
Yeah.
You know, I hear it all the time when I do like marriage counseling. It's like, well, they're not the same person when I married them. I'm like, I hope they're not 21 still at 45.
Right.
Like, I hope, you know.
I'd be telling people,
you know, like
people be like, "You changed." I'm like, "I know."
Good.
You should
Man,
too, bro.
Exactly.
I hope we change, right?
Yeah.
And so I think whether it be career or whether it be someone in
That's
ministry,
really good.
like if you're just like, it's got to be and feel the same as when I was a youth pastor, you know, it's like, no, it's not going to be that same. Well, when you're a youth pastor, you get to serve pizza, you get to preach and give out shoes and gift cards, and then you go to a new level of leadership, and all of a sudden you're the constant bad guy. All of a sudden you're the enemy of everyone because you're the boss or whatever. And you're like, man, this isn't the same. It's like, well, it's not going to be. No. And so if your commitment is just, well, I'm going to be in this to the end, it's like, then that's going to be a far thing because you're always comparing it off of the best years that you had that you felt the happiest rather than like I'm in an assignment in my marriage where me and my wife are leading a kindergartner and a toddler. And that is, and our marriage is going to look different. Date nights are going to look different because we have kids that have to be around us every second. We don't have 13, 14, and 15-year-olds who at this point who at that point would not really want much to do with us and just want to do their own thing. That would be a new season and a different season. And so though we are husband and wife, and though we're mom and dad, we are in an assigned season right now where we are leading developmental children who need a certain level of time from us that would be not what we were used to when she and I didn't have children or even one child and got to get up and go and do whatever. But so many people get so caught up on the best time or when we got to do this. And even in a career, I remember when I got to do that, it's the best time. But we didn't forget, like we've asked for this. You know, we want to have fruitful things, and we want to have a fruitful youth ministry that ultimately leads us to, like, I know when I got pulled out of youth ministry, it was the saddest day of my life. When my dad told me, hey, I want you to run services because we want to reach a new generation. That's your generation. So I want you to change the music, the lights. So essentially he said, I want you to be the bad guy in our church. Right? Like you got to change the music. You got to change the sound. And so I'm getting like pissed off members, and I'm just like, hey, I'm just doing my job. I'm just doing what my pastor told me. He said he doesn't want gospel every Sunday. He said he doesn't want just a white drape, and then just arrow. And I'm like, when I was the youth pastor a month ago,
come on.
I mean, dude, I'm doing a youth conference. Lecrae's coming in rapping. We're going to dinner. You know, I'm like, this sucks. You know, like, and then you know, a senior pastor now, and at 33, I'm like, oh, okay, it's a very hard season, very stressful season, but I see where you've assigned me over the years, God, and I'm gonna be, you know, because each season has its own little hardship. But I look at our youth pastors to this day, and I'm like, man, you get to bring 10 boxes of pizza to the high school. And,
so
oh my gosh, and it had its own hardship. Kids never told you thank you. You never got, you know, all that. Had its own element, but you just go. It's just very easy to fantasize a past or where your marriage was before and not realize, no, I'm assigned right now where this relationship is or where this career is right now.
I'll say this, and I know we're about
to close it it out. I
know we're about to finish, but the kind of picture I feel in my, like the picture I see in my mind is living open-handed versus closed fist. And I feel like what happens is not being able to change with each season and just say, God, I'm giving this to you. So it's not bad that we have a commitment to, like, God, I want to senior pastor for the rest of my life. But if you change the assignment, I'm willing for that. And I think one side is like, I want to change based off of what I think is best for me. And the other side is holding on so bad because we have a poverty mindset that if I let what I built go, God won't give me what I have for the next thing.
Yeah.
And I just think this, and we'll end it, is with Abraham, he was so waiting for a son. He tried to make it happen, and then he finally gets that son, and then God goes, all right, it's time to sacrifice him. And then he's like, oh, snap. So he immediately listens to God, right?
Yeah.
Read the Old Testament. It's beautiful. But then in a moment right before he's about to sacrifice his son, God says, stop.
Yeah.
And I think the problem we have as Christians, and we've talked about pastors and leaders, but I think this is just as people.
Yeah.
We get so dependent, and again, I'm talking about Christians, on what God said versus what God is saying. Mm-hmm. And I feel like what we got to do is we got to say, God, you said this, and I'm going to be obedient until you say something else. And so my encouragement for all of us, for myself mainly, and Will knows this more than all you guys, but I'm in a place where I was like helping with the team start Circuit Riders, and the Lord said transition that. And that was my DNA, and all my people were together, but I'm trusting the Lord and living in an open-handed place because I know what God's given me, it's not because of what I've done, but what God's doing. So my encouragement would be, as we live open-handed, it's not saying that we're not being diligent to our assignment, but we're saying, God, take this assignment because you know what's best for me, and I want to continue to follow your voice every step of the way.
So good.
Yeah, that's dope. I love that. Well, thank you, boys, for joining us. Appreciate it, man. Hope it was good for y'all. If you live in Long Beach, go check out Sean's church.
Yeah.
Light and Life.
Yeah.
Light and Life. That's what it is. And then, Will in the house.
That's
if
right.
you're in Orange County, beloved church, go check it out. That's my dog.
That's right.
You celebrated a year. It's like 6 months ago, 4 months, 2 months ago. 2
2
years.
2 years, 2 months
Right,
ago.
man.
Come on.
And then Sammy, I can't say much on it,
Yeah,
but
come to my house. We build it, baby.
if you live in Miami, you could check out Love Has No Limits.
Yeah, that's
they
right.
do a one-day
That's right.
outreach
Yep.
and evangelism movement.
Yep.
So you could check out. Is it One Day LA? Or
Yeah.
not One Day?
So,
One Day
yeah.
Miami?
Well,
That was the one we
so it's
did
going to
in
be
LA.
Love Has No Limits.
Yeah.
If you go to lovehasnolimits.com, we're doing stuff in Miami that'll be multiple years campaign. We're following up in Houston, and then we're going to be doing some fun stuff in SoCal, which I can't wait to talk to you guys about.
Yeah. So Sammy helps put on and pastor a lot of those relationships there. So if you're in Miami, because we got people listen all over, check out Love Has No Limits. It's a dope event. So thanks, y'all. Peace.
Peace.